everybody. Welcome to our third workshop. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to get started on this workshop. I think you all are going to enjoy our guest speaker this evening. I think gonna learn a lot. Our topic of our workshop this evening is on the topic of how do I prepare for a professional interview? So you're going into the interview, maybe you've gone to career fairs, maybe your mentors hooked you up and connected you with someone at their company. Maybe you've gotten some referrals somewhere else. Doesn't really matter. You are about to step into the interview. Maybe you've already had interviews before. This workshop is about how to think about interviews differently. We're bringing in guest speakers who are experts on this topic from around the world to give you insight and wisdom on how to make the most out of the professional interview. So this workshop is going to be about 45 minutes long with, and I encourage you to ask questions throughout the workshop. I'm going to ask you 3 questions during the workshop, which I'll have you answer. That's how you get credit for being here. You're now midway through the program so far. You should have already had your first conversation with your mentor. Hopefully you've already started setting up your second conversation with your mentor. If you have not, or you're struggling to get in touch with your mentor, please email support@ambition-in-motion.com. We need to take care of you so then you can get connected and make the most out of this program. So really, this program is all about how can you prepare for the first professional interview. Really, what you're selling your interviewer on is your ability, essentially your future potential opportunity. Essentially, you are selling them on your potential, because at the end of the day, people are not expecting you to come in and be the expert on XYZ topic. They are expecting you to be a willing learner and someone that's eager to gain knowledge and to be a better professional. If you can convey that, you will get the opportunity. But it will be competitive, especially in highly competitive industries. And I know that anybody that's in this program is more likely than not going into a career that's competitive. I mean, you would not have gotten a mentor had you not wanted to take your level, take your career, take your life to the next level. So with that said, I want to encourage you to keep your head up, keep applying, put yourself out there for more opportunities, and leverage the insight and knowledge that you're getting in these workshops to make yourself and to help you better prepare yourself for the interview. Now, before we get started into our main program, I want to ask you a quick question, and that question is, when it comes to the interview, how do you want people to feel about you? In other words, what feeling are you trying to convey about yourself when you are in an interview? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that, because I think if we are more intentional about how we want other people to feel about us in the interview, our likelihood of actually having that happen increases substantially. I mean, I've talked about in past workshops, strategy, story, state, which I will talk about in a moment, but this is a really big part of the story part. Like, what is the story that you're telling yourself? Now, I think sometimes we can interpret that as psyching ourselves up, getting ourselves confident, getting ourselves pumped for why we're going to be successful. And I think that's great. But I think if we could take it to another level, that being intentional about how we want other people to perceive us. So if we want them to perceive us as confident, or if we want them to perceive us as knowledgeable, or if we want them to perceive us as eager to learn and having potential, it could be a variety of things. But what I really want you to do is I really want you to identify feelings that you want other people to feel about you when you enter their world. Because you can be intentional about that. Your likelihood of having them actually feel that is much greater. But if you don't set the intention, you have no idea how they're going to feel about you. You've got really no control over it. But if you intentionally think to yourself, I want people to think of me as confident. Okay, what am I going to do that's going to convey convey confidence? Really, it's all about whatever that feeling you want to convey. Make sure that you are taking actions and being intentional about ensuring that other people view you that way, and that you come in trying to actively think about actions that you can take that will help other people perceive you in that light. So let's start under the next part of our workshop. Now, I've talked about this in the past before, and I've talked about this in previous workshops, but one of the big things that I always love to stress is the 3 keys to success in the program. There are 3 of them. That is your strategy, that is your story, that is your state. I bring it up every single time because it is that important. And the reason why it's important is because if we are not honing our strategy, honing our story, honing our state, we are not setting ourselves up for successful. If we let someone else drive our roadmap for us, we could end up in a location that we do not want to be. But if we are intentional about our story, if we're intentional about our strategy, if we are intentional about our state, we are much more likely to get to where we would like to go. It's kind of like the law of attraction. When we put it out there, and we put it out to more people, when we're more intentional about what we want to accomplish, and we're more intentional about how we are going to convey our bodies and ourselves to other people, the likelihood that it comes back to us is much greater. So I want to talk about state. State is the most important thing. Like physically, where are you at in your life, in your world? What is going on? I don't care how stressed you are. I don't care how mad you are. I don't care how dejected you are. I don't care of anything negative going on in your world. If you can get yourself into a state conducive for being successful, especially for the interview, you will be successful. I'm a big proponent of power poses. I'm a big proponent of screaming at the top of your lungs and dancing out. In fact, I'd like to do that with you right now. So for the next 30 seconds, what I like you to do is I like you to stand up. I like you to shimmy it out. I like you to shake it out. I like you to scream at the top of your lungs. Just scream at the top of your lungs at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Just let it out, let it loose, let it go, because you've got nothing to lose. I don't care if it's a popularity contest. I don't care if you're in a library. I don't care if you're in a house. What do you have to lose? This is not a coolness effort here. It's about making an impact and preparing yourself physically for being successful. What is the price of success? Getting yourself into a state conducive for being successful. Maybe looking a little weird to some of your colleagues, coworkers, or peers, but what is that cost to you in the long run? Nothing. They're going to say, you know, hey, what were you doing? Why were you dancing? Why were you screaming at the top of your lungs? You say, hey, I'm getting myself in a state conducive for being successful. Maybe they've never heard about it before. Maybe they've never learned. You can educate them on this. So don't worry about how other people are perceiving you when you are going to get yourself into a state that's going to level up your game, especially when it comes to the interview. Now, you may not want to do this in the office of a business that you are about to interview in, but you could certainly do it in the bathroom, in a bathroom stall. Get yourself into a 2-minute power pose. Stand up like Superman or Superwoman, or put your arms out like as if you're a star. There's a lot of things that you can do to get yourself into a state conducive for being successful, but you should be doing something, because if you're not, you are letting the way that other people perceive you essentially come up to chance. And you don't want to chance it, especially for the opportunity of a lifetime. And you have no idea which opportunity is the opportunity of a lifetime. It may not be this job. It could be the next one. If you make a positive impression in an interview and you may not land that job, that interviewer could have really loved how you interviewed, and that person may not be at that company for forever, or they might be, and they might come up with a new job. They might reach out to you personally to have you come and interview. It's all about the relationship. It's all about how they perceive you. It's all about that impression you leave. Your state is critical. Now, what is the story you tell yourself for why you are going to be successful? This is something we kind of did earlier when I asked you, how do you want other people to feel about you in the interview? This is a great exercise to prepare yourself for a professional interview. If you are intentional about how you want other people to feel about you, you're going to put yourself into a position to succeed, because then you're much more likely to manifest that outcome. Literally, law of attraction, putting it out there. I want other people to feel XYZ about me. Confident, smart, intelligent, well prepared. I don't care what it is. Maybe it's a weakness that you have, but you like to have them perceive it as a strength. Maybe it's a strength that you have that you'd really like to amplify even as a greater strength. Doesn't matter, but set an intention of something. Because if you don't set an intention of something, it could be wild in terms of what they actually perceive of you. Now, the last key is your strategy. What are the things that you're going to do to make the most out of this interview? Are you going to come prepared with questions? Are you going to come prepared with doing background research on the company? Are you going to make an intentional, focused effort on taking notes during the conversation, so then you're asking poignant, direct questions to the interviewer that are relevant about his or her life? Are you going to do the things that you need to do to be the most successful in an interview, or are you not? So the strategies you're going to learn from our guest speaker later on in this workshop, I think you're going to really enjoy what our guest speaker has to say. But before we jump into our guest speaker, I want to talk about one final thing, and that is getting yourself into a routine that can help you prepare for an interview. One of the things that I like to do, have an accountability partner. This could be it could be anybody. But what you want to do with your accountability is you want to share with your accountability partner 3 things that you learned this week and 1 thing that you've done to get closer to that internship or job. What this does, and you might think this sounds silly, you might think this sounds crazy, it could be another student in the program, it could be a friend of yours, does not matter. But what we've learned, what we've observed is that students who land jobs and internships through this program are substantially more likely to actually land that job and internship if they told other people about their experience. One of the questions we ask at the end of the question is, on average, how many other people did you tell about your experience in the program? What we ended up learning was that when a student told 20 or more people about their experience in Ambition in Motion, their likelihood of also landing their job and internship was substantially higher than students who didn't. There's a direct correlation to you telling more people about your experience and what you're learning in this program to actually landing the outcomes you like than not. So I want to challenge you to identify an accountability partner. Share with them 3 things that you've learned this week and 1 thing that you've done to help you get closer to landing that job or internship. If you don't mind being an ambassador for this program, I'm helping encourage other students to get involved and take advantage of this. I would greatly appreciate it because it would help us make a bigger impact on more people, which is really what our goal is. So let's jump into our workshop. I'm so excited for you to meet our guest speaker. I'm so excited to transition into this next part of the workshop. Remember to answer the 3 questions that we asked during the workshop. That's how you get credit for being here within 24 hours of the workshop going live. If you got any questions, any concerns, any issues with anything at all, please email support@ambition-in-motion.com. We will answer those questions, concerns, and issues. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited for you to meet our guest speaker.
Hey everybody, I'm so excited to dive into our workshop for this evening. Topic is how to prepare for the interview. So a lot of you may be thinking like, oh, I've interviewed before. Oh, I'm going through different scenarios and when it comes to interviewing. Well, we're here to talk about what are the things that you should be doing, what are the things that you shouldn't be doing, how to go about professionally handling the circumstances, how to go about setting your resume and your cover letter apart, because there's going to invariably be a lot of people applying for a lot of the roles that you also might be interested in. And so distinguishing yourself, making yourself unique is really critical. Fortunately, we've got a great guest with us here today. We've got Dustin Laycock. Dustin has been in the HR space and the recruitment space for many, many years. He's got a wealth of knowledge as it pertains to how to prepare for the interview. Dustin, thanks for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, Dustin, I kind of gave a very high-level overview of you and just your experience in the HR and recruitment space, but do you mind just introducing yourself to the students and just sharing who you are and how you got here and in the work that you've done so far?
Yeah, so I'm Dustin. I am an accidental recruiter, I like to call myself. I don't think anybody ever grows up wanting to be a recruiter, but I fell into recruiting. I got a contract at an agency, and just really kind of fell in love with it and ended up made a great career out of it. I started off, like I said, started off at a small agency, ended up going to Bizarre Voice, a startup or scale up here in Austin. And then from there, Retell Me Not, Disco, Canva, and now I'm helping Zello, a small startup here in Austin, helping them with their next wave of scale. So
very cool. I love it. That's sweet. So let's dive right into the topic. Preparing for the interview can be really nerve-wracking for students. It can be very just different from maybe what they've been accustomed to so far. What can students do to prepare their resume? I mean, really, what are employers looking for when they're reviewing a person's resume or cover letter?
Yeah, this has gotten a little more, I guess, complicated over the years. Used to, everybody just mailed in their resume or showed up at a job fair or whatever it may be. But today, I think customization is super important, and there's plenty of tools out there, plenty of AI tools, things like that can make customization pretty easy. But, really what employers are looking for and what I'm looking for when I'm evaluating a resume, I want to connect the dots to the job description, and really customization is a really easy way to do that. I also want you to use your intro paragraph, if it's a cover letter, or a little blurb at the very top to tell me where you want to go. A resume, 90% of the real estate is focused on where you've been, but I really want to know where you want to go and how this role or this job that you're applying for, how you believe it'll help get you there. Also, keep it short and sweet. I've seen 15-page resumes, and I'm not going to spend 30 minutes on a single resume. I think the average recruiter probably spends 30 to 60 seconds on a resume. So, you got to make it count, make it short and sweet.
That's funny. That's a really great point. I think sometimes people like you are your own worst judge of your own resume. I think oftentimes I'll look at someone's resume, they'll go 0-point borders, 7-point font. You got to wear a bifocal to like even read anything because they think they have to put every experience they've ever had doing anything. You got like middle school GPAs on there. You're like, what are you doing? This is like not relevant at all to
Right.
any of what we're doing here. Just come on and focus. So do you, when it comes to customizing your resume, like you had said, how do you suggest students go about maybe getting that customization while at the same time getting that objective feedback on how to prepare and make the resume as best as it can be?
Well, I think one thing that you can do is make sure that the jobs that you're outlining on your resume or the experience that you're outlining is congruent to the role, or that you can tie it to the role. I'm at the point in my career where, I spent my first 10 years out of school in sales, and a lot of that experience was great, but it doesn't really apply anymore. What I've done since then in recruiting is much more relevant. And so I think, making sure that your experience is relevant to the role, the company, and really, like I said, just helping connect those dots.
Yeah. Talk about AI for a second with resume and cover letter.
Yeah.
It's so funny. You hear different perspectives. I talk to some people, they're like, do not use Chat GPT to build your cover letter. Then you hear other people that are like, yeah, you know what? If you got a resource available to you, take advantage of it. Where do you stand on the whole AI resume cover letter, helping augment that sort of stuff? And do you have any tools that you recommend? And do you have any like suggested tips, even when you are using AI, if you do choose to use AI to help you with your resume or cover letter, to like maybe not make it so generic? What are your thoughts on that? What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't have a problem with somebody using AI to um, to get a head start. I use it a lot of times, in emails, putting together job descriptions, doing research, things like that. I use it as the starting point, but I almost always have to edit stuff down to, to get it to the point that I want it at. And so I think candidates should approach it the same way, right? So it's great to use Chat GPT to get a baseline cover letter or a baseline resume, but you know there is going to be some level of customization, and you want to keep you know as much humanness in it as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think I've seen a lot of people just rattle off cover letter after cover letter from Chat GPT, and they don't, no proofreading, no double checking, just send them out, and they're not as effective or successful as they would like to be.
Right, right.
But Dustin, you're interesting. You're one of the, well, not actually rare people. I don't interview people on like how do they feel about cover letters all the time, but when I do chat with people, especially in the interviewer like space that are looking at candidates, you're one of the not actually few people, but at least from my experiences, that actually read the cover letter. Um, yeah, what does the cover letter do for you?
Well, to me, a good cover letter really shows me somebody's personality. It shows me their interest, right? I mean, it's hard to feign interest through a resume, but a cover letter really shows that, hey, you did research on the company, you looked at, you read the job description, you can just see, oh, software engineer title, apply, right? Um, so yeah, it just shows an elevated interest to me. Also, like sometimes I'm reading through a resume and I really can't decide, if I should move the person on or not. Sometimes the cover letter ends up being the tiebreaker, honestly. And so um, I will say, like, keep them short and sweet. Again, like you don't have to write me a novel. I'm not going to read War and Peace to make a decision. But yeah, I mean, I think they're valuable.
Cool. No, that's good to know. So I think a lot of students, or not just students in general, but I think when economies are going well, it's easier to get a job. When economies are in a little bit more of a difficult spot, it's maybe a little more challenging. How do you suggest students maintain their, not just their ethos, but their like core values when it comes to assessing jobs and opportunities? I think sometimes it can be easy to uh, find exceptions
Sure.
to your value system when you're struggling to get that job.
Yeah, I've never seen that work out. Um, you know, I'd rather hold on and find a company that, matches my values, matches my career track, rather than, take the first offer that comes my way. Um, I recently, my wife went through this personally. Like she got a couple of offers, but she didn't like the companies didn't align with her values. They didn't align with the industry or what she really wanted to do going forward. And so she turned it down. She ended up in a great position at a great company that matches their values. And so, you know, I also think, economies recover and we've been through this before. And, you know, once that economy recovers, you're going to be out the door. And, that's going to, it may recover in 6 months. It may take a few years, but, what I'm seeing more and more is people leaving because they're not, um, they're saying their values didn't align with the company. And it makes me wonder if we're interviewing when you're interviewing, are you taking, a company's values and your values into effect?
Mm. Well, let's talk about that for a second,
Yeah.
because I think it's a two-sided sword. And I know outside of this conversation, Dustin, you and I have talked about this, but when companies say that they're interviewing for culture fit,
Mm,
it's a fascinating dichotomy of like what's going on there. As a candidate, when I'm interviewing for culture fit, when I'm looking for people, or rather, when I'm looking for companies that are going to fit my value system, what can I ask to get a better idea as to what that company is like? I think this is something, by the way, most students don't do is interview the company just as much as the company is interviewing you.
yeah, for sure. I've had candidates that have, gone through and found articles, and asked asked me or asked other interviewers point blank, like, what was, the business's thought process behind this? And usually there's a good explanation, right? Usually there's more to the story than you could just dig up on the internet. Um, I think if it would be a red flag if a company avoided answering those questions, unless there was a legal reason they couldn't. But um, so yeah, I think most companies these days too also post their values on their website, right? And so I think finding a couple of those values that resonate with you and maybe using those as questions, hey, how do you feel this team exhibits excellence, for example, right? Or how do you in your day-to-day exhibit, you know, this value? I think those are good questions. And you know, uh, candidates, they'll have a good BS meter and they'll be able to tell whether somebody's being honest or not. And then, you can see how that aligns with your values.
Well, how do you suss out the BS? Because there are a lot of companies that have a lot of values that you get so excited, you're like, oh my gosh, they say they've got a dedication to innovation. What? That's amazing. When's the last time you implemented some person's new idea? Never. Okay.
Right.
So when you say innovation and collaboration and voices are heard or whatever, what does that actually mean? Like, is it innovation only like from the top down, or is it innovation where people actually have a voice? What is your innovation process? Like, what I'm using innovation as an example
Yeah.
because it's a buzzword that people use all the time, and if you just take it for itself on its face value, it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different companies.
Right. Right. I think just asking for examples, right? Or and whether it be a personal example of the interviewer, or whether it be like a broader conversation around, tell me like how somebody here has brought an idea to the E team and then launched it. I mean, I've for myself, like, you know, we have a hackathon every year. And a couple months ago, I was able to take my hackathon project and actually launch it, right? And so, I think, yeah, I think you'll pretty quickly be able to tell um, whether somebody is lying to you or stretching the truth or just speaking in generalities. And so, yeah.
What is the appropriate amount of discerning a candidate can be in the interview process? And by that, I just mean like when when you're like, oh, give me an example. As the time that you were innovative, like, oh yeah, Jenny implemented this one thing. And then as a candidate, you might say, like, oh, what's Jenny's title? Oh, Jenny's the chief operating officer. Cool. How about someone who's not on the executive team? I might have to think about that and want to get back to you. Like, yeah, no worries. I just, I'd be curious to know, like, when you say innovation, is it innovation top down or is it innovation across the company? Like,
Right.
how are voices heard? Like, if you get potentially too discerning, it might be a turn off. But at the same time, if you are that discerning and they're turned off by that, is it really the right fit for you?
Yeah, look, you're interviewing for a job that you're going to spend 40 hours a week average at, right? Like, I think it's totally fair that candidates be as discerning as they need to be to make the right call for them. So, we actually in our interview training talk about, hey, if a candidate digs into something, they're not, you know, they're interviewing us just as much as we're interviewing them. So let them answer honestly.
I think it's a turn on. I think it's great. I think it's like
Yeah.
something like, oh my gosh, this person's like really serious. It's almost kind of like, I don't know, where for whatever reason, this is the adage that comes to mind. It's like if you love something, let them go. And if they come back to you, they're yours forever. And if they don't, they never were. But it's kind of like
Right.
if somebody's really discerning in the interview process, they're asking a lot of questions and they're kind of grilling you as a candidate and as an employer, like these are good things. It shows that there's genuine intrigue. If it's all fluffball questions, they're staying on the superficial level. So let me ask the students a question real quick. Post in the comment section, what are your value systems for what you want from an employer in your next job? Post in the comments. I'd love to learn. Um, so Dustin, what are some great questions students can ask to show that they've done their homework and show some interest in the role?
Yeah, I mean, there's some general questions that I think everybody should know, or should ask, um, in order to make their own decision. How does the business make money? I think it's a great question. And I think, if they can't answer that question, yeah, that's some cause for concern, right? Um, how big is your addressable market, and what size of market share do you have? Um, if the addressable market, like in using Zello, for example, like our addressable market is 3 billion people. And so, if I said, well, there's only, really 30 people that use this product in the world, that might not be for me. That means that there may not be, big problems to go solve. Speaking of which, like getting an understanding of what problems you'll solve, hey, if I started tomorrow what are the 3 problems that I'm going to solve in my first 90 days? Getting an understanding of that. How does the company plan to grow? Is it going to grow through acquisitions? Is it going to grow through new verticals? Is it going to grow through new products, new markets? Are they planning on IPOing, right? Like, what are, how's the company going to grow? Is it really, really important question. Kind of links back to that. How does the business make money, right? And then when it comes to the role itself, I think asking questions like, tell me about the most successful person in this role. And then using that to inform your interviews as you go through, right? Being able to connect the dots. Now, connect the dots honestly, don't lie. But, I think if you can get an understanding of what makes somebody successful in that role, you can often tie your experience back to that and make yourself stand out from others.
Man, those are great questions to ask. I mean, gosh, I love how does the business make money? That's so sweet. I just think it's such a basic question, but it's such a real question. Students, you should absolutely be asking that question. It's a great one. I'm just thinking of of all the Ponzi schemes. I'm thinking of like FTX or something like that. It's like, how does the business
Right.
make money? Well, we capture money people that they think they're investing in cryptocurrency, and instead of actually having it as an investment vehicle, we keep it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Like, and you'd be surprised, like how, very few candidates that I interview from entry level on up to executive ask that question. So
Great point. Yeah, no, I like that. That's cool. What is the biggest mistake an applicant typically makes in the interview process?
I have war stories for days, but I think one thing, first off, I mean, even before the interview, there's a lot of details that go into and like just scheduling an interview, getting to that point. So I think number one, spell check, please. Grammar check. You know, there's so many tools out there that will make this super easy for you, and a lot of them are built into a lot of the editors you'll be using. Like, just use it. Um, there's there's nothing more frustrating to me than somebody who talks about how dental oriented they are. And I've seen that before. You
Well,
know,
hey, they really care about flossing.
right, exactly. Good for you. Glad you brush your teeth, but don't know how that relates to a sales role. Um, I think being on time, being responsive. I think a really important one that I've seen happen a few times is, you know, people are really nice to the recruiter. They're really great to the people that are interviewing them, but they're really crappy to, the person that's scheduling or the person at the front desk. And believe me, like if you're rude to the person who's scheduling my interviews, I'm going to hear about it. And that's almost like that's close to an automatic disqualifier, because that shows how you really would function in the workplace. And you know um, kindness goes a long way. So um yeah, I mean, all the detail, like always kind of being on, right, throughout the process, whether it's in the interview or before the interview or scheduling the interview or showing up, I think is super important. People that show up with no questions, like, I usually, when I would interview, I would show up and I would have like 10 questions for each person, ready to go, because I didn't want to run out of questions. And I just gave you 5 that I thought of off the top of my head, like 30 minutes before you and I started chatting. It's really easy to Google, like, what are some great questions to ask in an interview, right? Um, I think people not actively listening and not answering the question. I see this a lot. I'm seeing a lot more of it. I don't know if it's just like a symptom of our distraction culture or whatever, but I'm seeing where I'll ask a question and the answer I get back like has absolutely nothing to do with it, or it takes the person going through a 5 to 10 minute dialogue to get to the answer. There's a great method that anybody, I mean, you can Google, and there's tons and tons of articles and how-tos and videos on it. It's called the STAR method, and it's super simple to remember. When you're answering a question, you talk about the situation, that you talk about the task at hand, what you were tasked to do, the action that you took, and the result. If you can frame your answers in that way, makes it super easy for the interviewer to follow along and ask follow-up questions. People that don't do research before they go in. I actually had somebody show up one time for an interview, had no idea what position they were interviewing for. Not researching your interviewers. I mean, everybody's on LinkedIn, right? We all know how to use Google. So just spending, 30 minutes the night before, just Googling the names of the people that you're going to interview, and researching the company. Like, you'd be surprised, like the number of people that ask if we're a hardware company that sells walkie-talkies, and I mean, if you just went to our site, you would quickly realize that no, we are a software company. And I think the last thing that is a huge mistake is lying on your resume or LinkedIn. I have a great example. At one of the companies I worked for, we had a software engineer that I had actually worked with at a previous company apply for a role on one of our innovation teams. And he went through the interview process, did great. And we were getting ready to we actually did make an offer. And he signed it, gave us 2 weeks notice. And lo and behold, the background check came back and said he did not have a degree. But on his resume and on LinkedIn, he said he had graduated. Now, and we rightfully said, hey, sorry, dishonesty is not, it's not cool with us. It doesn't align with our values. So we're gonna have to withdraw our offer. Funny thing is, that person went back to his school and found out, he was only one class from actually getting his degree. And he went back, found out that the program had changed and he could actually apply for his degree, and he ended up getting it. And he ended up getting a great job after that. So, but that just shows that lying, even about something small, it's not acceptable. And if you're lying, on your resume or on LinkedIn, chances are people are going to find out.
That's a really good one. No, that's those are great stories. I love that. Man, I think this is really helpful for a lot of students as they're contemplating things that they can avoid. I'd love to know, students in the comment section, post in the chat. I'd love to learn, what is a mistake that you've made in the interview process? I'd love to add a little humility, because we've all made mistakes before in the interview.
Oh, yeah.
So the goal is that we can learn from it. So post in the comment section, what is a mistake that you've made in the interview process before? Dustin, what's a mistake that you've made?
Oh gosh. Well, it was actually the interview that I did that got me into recruiting. I completely blew it. I had not interviewed in years. And kind of didn't know what I was getting into. And but Googled what is recruiting and knew nothing really going in. And walked out of that interview going, man, I just blew it. I didn't get that job. Luckily, the person called me back, said, hey, I'd like to give you a chance. And, the rest is history. But yeah, I remember walking out of that interview just going, oh, man, I just blew that opportunity. That sucks.
Man, that's thanks for sharing that. That's great. I keep thinking I just started watching this new TV show called Jury Duty. It's on Amazon.
Oh yeah.
Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Oh, it is hilarious. There's this scene for anybody who's not seen the TV show. It's like by the creators of The Office, so it's a lot of that similar type of hijinks. But this defense lawyer is completely unprepared. He like comes in the case defending his like client, and he is pulling up details from a totally different case. And he's just like, "Oh my gosh, Your Honor, I'm so sorry. I just have a lot of cases. Things have been really busy. I don't even have my paperwork." And it's hilarious. It's
Yeah.
hilarious. Like the lack of preparation is is super funny. It's a good show. But yeah, it's when I think of not being prepared, not doing your research ahead of time, that's just the thing that's coming to my mind right now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great example.
Um, so how should an applicant follow up after the interview? So you have an interview, maybe you thought it went well, maybe you thought you bombed, you're probably somewhere more likely in the middle. Uh,
Yeah.
how should an applicant follow up after the interview?
Well, I think at the end of of every interview, you should ask, what's the timeline so that you have an idea, right? You can ask the recruiter, if you're talking to the hiring manager, just, hey, like when should I expect to hear back? Or when are you looking to make a decision? Um, that way, you know when to start sending emails asking, hey, like what's the status, or where do I stand, or do you need more information, etc. I think another important thing, and this is kind of old fashioned, but I really enjoy it when candidates send thank you notes. And not only to me, but to the entire, to the entire interview team, to my coordinator. Like it just really keeps them top of mind. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, there's every role is different. Every role timeline is different. So I can't say like, oh, follow up in 2 weeks. Um, one thing that I'm really bothered by is this I've been reading about a lot of employers ghosting candidates, which is unfortunate. And I hope that that's just like a temporary thing that goes away. But
That's good to know, and that's good to shed light on. I love what you said about writing a handwritten note. I mean, definitely send a thank you email like right afterwards. I think that's great. But the handwritten note is so powerful. Before Ambition Emotion, grew to where it's at. For the first 5 years of building the business, I was not drawing a salary, so I was a bartender and server on nights and weekends to pay for rent and bills and all that sort of fun stuff. And I had applied for a role at the nicest restaurant in my town that I was living in at the time. And I had very little experience as a bartender and server at this moment in time in my life. And I interviewed and I thought I did fine. I thought everything was fine. I was probably somewhere in the middle of the pack. I knew it was a competitive role because it is, a really high caliber restaurant. And I wrote a handwritten thank you note after the interview and just sent it in the mail. And it got there like, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6 days later. And it ended up getting the job. And the GM, the person who ended up hiring me, was like, Garrett, you got this job because of this handwritten letter. Like, to be honest, there was a lot of candidates with a whole lot more experience than what you had, but you were the only person to write a thank you letter. And that's what totally put you over the top.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
And
I think it's just like, it's a very old school thing that a lot of people don't think of, but I think it's I think regardless, if you don't get that role, you'll be remembered, right? So if a future role comes up, like you kind of put yourself at the top of the pack.
yeah, yeah, no, that's right. And I think that's so huge. And it really does go a long way. And I love that idea of just being an alumnus of an interaction. So as opposed to being, oh, screw those jerks, they didn't hire me. It's like you're an alumnus.
Right.
You're someone they hold in high regard. There's someone that they follow up with. In fact, we've interviewed in past recordings, people where they interviewed for a job, didn't end up getting that job, but was super professional throughout the entire experience, wrote a handwritten thank you note, job opening opens up 3-4 months later. They reached out to her and she ended up getting the job. They didn't even really have a formal interview process because she was the person they'd already pegged because they loved her so much from the first interview. So,
well, and that happens a lot more often than you think. So I think just making yourself stick out is, by doing like something simple like a handwritten thank you note is a great way to follow up.
so I guess I'd love to ask the students one final question. What do you want what would your vision for a employer experience be when they think about their interview with you? Write in the comments section. I love to learn. Like, what is the vision? What is the desired outcome when an employer leaves their interview with you? How do you want them to feel about you? I think if we don't intentionally set that like intention, it'll be very varying. But if we said, I want them to know that I'm dedicated, or I want them to know that I'm curious, or I want them to know that I'm hardworking, or I want them to know that I'm smart, whatever the thing you want them to leave with, put it down in the comment section. I love to learn, because if we don't have an intention about it, very unlikely that we're able to achieve the desired outcome that we want to achieve. So if we set a goal of, I want people to think this when they leave the interview with me, bam, that's huge. That's awesome. But put it in the comment section. How do you want the employer to feel about you when they leave the interview with you? But Dustin, I want to ask you another question. How should a student handle having multiple offers or receiving one offer while waiting for another? This is something I've seen often where, especially students, because they might be in the middle of the semester where the job won't start for another 6 months or something until they finish their schoolwork. How should students handle that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's interesting. There is this trend, at least with engineering schools, where students actually have a imposed deadline to get back to companies. Likewise, companies, have to give students that amount of time to get through all their interviews and make the decision that's best for themselves. So sometimes it's that, that's kind of imposed by the school. But when it's not, I think just being honest, right? Like, hey, like I really enjoyed this, really enjoyed the interview. I have three other interviews that I got to finish up over the next few weeks, and then I'll be ready to make a decision. I think, I appreciate somebody being honest with me rather than accepting my offer and then getting a better one 3 weeks later and rescinding. Like, that just, that's not that's just not a great way. That's a great way to burn a bridge, is what that is. And trust me, recruiting world is small. Most towns, a lot of businesses talk. So I think, just being honest throughout the process, giving your timeline. I think always leaving the door open is super important. And I have a great example of this. We have an intern that he, due to the economy, his summer internship in April, they informed him that they weren't going to be able to give him his internship. And, he luckily he was able, we had talked to him before, and he called us up and said, hey, like, my other internship fell through. Can I come join you this summer? And we were able to, make it happen. And so I think, always being respectful, always leaving the door open, especially in this economy, is super important. But yeah, I mean, being honest, giving your timeline, like that's all we can really ask.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think that transparency is really critical. I've got like this hilarious just story, and it's real, especially in the engineering space where people have and it depends on like where you're at, what type of company you're in, what culture you're in, all that sort of stuff. But I've seen scenarios, especially in the engineering space, where some people will have to put in a like as opposed to it being a 2-week notice, it's a 30, 60, or even 90-day notice. And so once they get the offer, that's like open season to start hunting other offers. And so it's almost like a meme. It's like, suck it, you got outbid.
Right.
I accepted your offer and I have officially rescinded it. And now I'm going to this company for this much more money.
Yep.
And then it's super frustrating because the employer has no idea until the start date when that person doesn't show up. They're like, oh, whoops, I forgot to tell you, I'm not starting now. I'm starting somewhere else. It's a competitive space out there for engineers, but I love the idea about the transparency thing. Actually, one of our past speakers shared this thing. I love to learn your thoughts on this. I think you'll probably like love it, but I want to share this with the students. There's this woman named Tina. She was sharing that she was really adamant about hiring this gentleman out of college. She made an offer, and he ended up getting another offer for almost double the money. It was substantially more. And as opposed to turning her down, he went to her and he said, "Hey, Tina, here's the other offer I got. Can you come close to this? Like, can you help me come up with a pros cons list for why I should take your offer, why I should go with this offer?" And she's like, honestly, after going through the pros cons list, you should take this other offer. It's just a better, it's just a objectively better offer. But I do have approval once you gain that experience here to pay you much more money now that you've got some experience to take on this more of like a higher level position within our organization. And I'd love for you to come back. So back to that whole alumnus mentality. This guy built a bridge by being fully transparent, laying out the offers and saying, "Hey, can we just come up with a pros cons list here?" And she was like, "I can't even get close to that number. You're go off and kill it and, have some fun and, do your thing. But whenever you decide you want to make a switch, please keep us in mind because I have budget to hire for this kind of salary, moving forward." And in fact, I think she ended up rehiring that person like 3 years later. So it ended up working out.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you never know when your paths are going to cross again. So, I think it's very important to build that network. I call it network equity, right?
Totally. Network equity. I love that. Power of reputation.
That's right.
Oh man. It's the end of the day on a Friday, so I just have all these like funny jokes and ideas that keep coming to my mind. Have you ever seen this TV show, The In-Betweeners?
I've heard of it. I haven't watched it though.
It's a British TV show. It's about these high school kids. They're not popular. They're not losers. They're somewhere in between. And one of their friends ends up getting a car, and it's a really like crappy rundown car, but it's a car. And so all their friends are like super excited to pile in. And one of the guys like sticks his head out the window and he sees a bunch of people standing in line to wait to get on the bus. And he's like, "Bus wankers." And they thought it was so funny. But then the car breaks down right next to the bus stop. And so all the people, they just call wankers to her like, "I'm not helping you. You just insulted me."
Yep.
So
Yeah.
the network reputational awareness, I just think it's so powerful. And you don't want to burn bridges. Be transparent, be upfront with everything. I think there's so much power to that. Dustin, this has been great. Any final and parting words you want to share with our students around anything they should be thinking about as it pertains to pursuing their career path and their next steps forward?
Yeah, I'll just go back to the beginning of our discussion. Like, stick to your values. Find companies that align with your values. You're going to be happier in the long run. Like, nobody wants to go spend 40 hours at a company that, that their values just don't align with. So, stick to your values. Be transparent. Connect the dots. Like, help us out a little bit and connecting the dots, and just be prepared. We understand that you're taking your time out, to interview with us, but we're also, putting a lot of hours in ourselves interviewing. So, just be prepared and don't burn bridges.
Love it. Dustin, thanks for being here. Great insight. Students, thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your night. See everybody.
All right. Thanks.